So hello, everybody, and welcome to the next edition of the ArborGen TreeLines Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Jeffries, and today we are going to dive into everything about seedling care and handling and planting and everything that is currently going on right now in the forestry world in the southeastern United States. It seems like every time I leave my office and go somewhere, I'm always passing a truck or a trailer or somebody that is moving a planting crew to the next site that is going to be planted with fresh seedlings. And that is going to be our topic today. I am Paul Jeffries, reforestation advisor for Mississippi and Alabama. And I have a deep interest in this topic. Simply because as a private landowner and timberland owner myself, I had a reforestation project this year. And our two guests today are going to talk about everything that we need to do or that a person needs to do to make sure that that project goes smoothly and goes correctly and ultimately is successful, because all we want to do is to be able to go out and look at our reforestation project in the next couple of years and see a bunch of bright, beautiful green heads sticking up above the growth that has come back. And I call them green heads because they just shine, and it is just beautiful to look across that. So I'm looking forward to seeing that on my own property. And I know that all of our listeners have gone through that same scenario. So, with that being said, I am a registered forester, and in Alabama and Mississippi, my background is extensive in forestry. I taught at Mississippi State University for a little stretch of time while I was working on my doctorate. But what began my interest in forestry was growing up in Northwest Alabama on a family farm. I'm blessed to have two family farms that I grew up on, and it just increased or just created a passion in me for forestry. And our first guest that I want to introduce today is Miss Nina Payne. And I think she has a very similar story and history and background like I do, growing up in South Georgia and growing up on her family farm. And I dare say, Nina, I'm pretty sure you probably had some soil. I'm not going to call it dirt, because my in forestry school that will get you docked some points.
Mhm.
But I'm sure growing up in South Georgia, Miss Nina Payne, you had some soil squished between your toes as a little girl
Mhm.
growing up on a farm. You care to tell us a little bit about your history and how you got into doing what you do in forestry and working with seedlings on a regular basis?
Okay, I'd love to. My story's a little bit longer than yours. I've been around longer
Well,
than
I'm not gonna say anything about age. Now, we're
well, I
not
don't
going
mind
down
at
that
all.
track. Don't trap me, Nina. Don't trap me.
I'm trying, really
Okay.
trying. So,
Okay.
I did grow up in Southwest Georgia in the
Okay.
Albany area. So, my
Okay.
dad bought, some timberland when I was either in middle school or high school, and
Okay.
at the time, I was trying to decide what to major in, and I thought about math, biology, and something outdoors. And at the time, my high school had a forestry class, and it was all the FFA boys. And I thought, yeah, I'll try this. And of course, they looked at me funny when I walked in, but that introduced me to forestry. But way before that, I was my daddy's bird dog
Okay.
for that's one of my earliest memories is running out in the field, in the dove field and picking up the dead birds. It
Okay.
really is, and I can remember him yelling at me saying, "It's not dead yet," and him saying, "Just step on its neck," you know?
My goodness.
Earliest memories, it really is,
Yeah.
until
Right.
my brother got old enough my younger brother got old enough to take over bird dog duties, so
Okay.
that's how I grew up doing that, and then once we bought the land, if a boy wanted to date my sister or me, they had to come out there and plant trees. So
Really?
yes, that was so I got introduced to planting trees
Wow.
real fast too, so that was really my introduction. So
Well, that was a good way to weed out the ones that didn't wanna work, because as we all know on this call, tree planting is not easy work.
No.
So, if they had to plant trees to be able to carry you out on
Mm.
a date, I mean, I'm sure they were lining up, you
No,
know.
well, I didn't go on many dates, I'll just put it that way. Okay. He weeded them out pretty good, so anyway. But I went ahead and so I also worked for St. Joe Paper Company the whole time I was in high school and even in college, and, I was one of the first women to attend Auburn's forestry program. Back
Really?
even in the '60s, women weren't allowed to come to major in forestry. So I was one of the first 10 women, uh, to major in forestry and one of the OGs on staff here, so
Right.
I love talking with some of the younger women we have here that are majoring in forestry or wildlife anyway, so but I got my degree way back in the day. We're not gonna talk about when, my forestry degree, and, a couple of years ago, I decided to go back to school and got my master's degree, and it was
Okay.
almost exactly 40 years after I got my bachelor's degree. So that's one of my proudest achievements is being able to sit in the classroom with a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds and hold my own. So that was totally new. I'd never done online classes or I hadn't taken a test in 40 years. I mean, it was a step out, yes.
Wow, that in itself, okay, so let's just back up. Let's break that down a little bit. You were one
Okay.
of the first 10 ladies to attend forestry school at Auburn, so that is an honor. That is absolutely an achievement that we could sit and talk about for a long time. But then on top of that, to go back after 40 years and work on a master's degree and go back into grad school, knowing how difficult that is, at my age now, if I had to sit back down and pick up a textbook and start studying again to try to take, I'm not so sure. That's why I never let my registered forester's license
But
in either
mine
state
too.
lapse is because I do not want to have to sit down and take another test or study
Right.
for another test.
Yep.
That is just been there, done that. For all you young people out there, study your butts off. But when you get out of school and get older, that stuff becomes harder to
It's
do.
much harder, yes, it's
Yep.
much harder. So
Well,
in between that first degree and the second degree, was a long period of time, but I worked for, different forest products companies and consultants. I did everything basically from, marked trees, cruise timber, did prescribed burning, built roads, worked with private landowners, just did, a little bit of everything. Did some forest engineering work that I found out I'm not good at. So
really?
you find out what you're not good at, right? And also what you enjoy doing. And I really enjoy working with landowners or growers. And I'm also a timberland owner, just like you. It's family property. And my situation is a little different because my family members don't listen to me, and I
Right.
think yours probably listen to you, I don't know,
No,
but
no,
okay, well, we're in the
no.
same boat then. Mine don't really listen to me very much, so but it's still very interesting to come at our jobs from, a customer basically, and advising landowners, so now I'm working with it's called the Southern Forest Nursery Management Association or Cooperative at Auburn. It's based at
That's a
Auburn.
mouthful. That's a
And
mouthful.
even the acronym is SIFNIC, so that's not real catchy. So we just say the nursery co-op is how we talk about it.
Yeah.
So I've been working here for a while and working with 31 different nurseries across the Southeast in 12 different states. So ArborGen's one of our members. One of our member nursery has been for a while. So I work with all things nursery. Our nurseries direct our research. They come to us with problems and we try to solve them or find somebody that can.
Right. So needless to say, you've seen a lot of seedlings.
I've seen a lot of seedlings. I've bought a lot of seedlings. I've planted a lot of seedlings. Don't want to plant anymore myself if I can get out of it. But I was recently cleaning out my parents' garage and I found 6 old dibbles. Like, this is my dad, 6 dibbles. They
Mm.
all had bent handles. Like, how are you
Huh?
gonna use a dibble with a bent
Yeah.
handle? But he had
How
saved
do
all
you
those.
bend a dibble handle? I mean, the dibbles I've had, the handles are steel.
They are. They're still but you talk about some clay dirt
Okay.
in South Georgia,
South
so
Georgia
and we had a
dirt.
Christmas tree farm, so we had people out there planting those trees, but daddy's in his 90s now, and he had saved 6 bent dibbles just in case, so every family member's gonna get one now.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Well, that's great. So you had a Christmas tree farm also. So that's
Right.
interesting. That's a forest industry that not many people think about when you think about forestry, but it is a very important part of a forest industry.
And that was my mom's. That was mama's
Okay.
business. So my parents were, they had me outside. That's just what we did back then. We went outdoors. We didn't have
Okay.
any we had, maybe one channel on the TV growing up, and so we spent our time outdoors.
Not to get sidetracked on this because we can go down so many rabbit holes,
Yes,
and
we
I have a
can.
tendency to do so. But I just remember talking about my passion growing up, and as a kid, when we were out of school, it was you get outside and you go do something, and you don't come home until the lights come on.
Right.
And don't let mama call you twice. And, but backing up again to what you were saying about working with landowners and everything, you and I are a member of an association together that is very important to forestry, and that is the Association of Consulting Foresters. But you and I are both active members of the Alabama chapter, and that is a passion that I had is also working with private landowners. When I came out of working at the university level teaching, and I started working with private landowners, I didn't think I would ever find. Well, let's just say it is very rewarding to help someone who is a private landowner work on their legacy. And let's face it, you and I are both, and Gene, you too, we have we're private landowners, and that's going to be our legacy that we hand down to the next generation. So, it's very important. Well, jumping over to our next guest is my friend, personal friend, and colleague, Mr. Gene Bickerstaff. And Gene, you are our nursery manager for our Bullard Nursery. You are also our director of U.S. operations. Congratulations on your recent promotion here within the
That's right.
company and
Thank you.
everything. And like Nina and I, you grew up in a different state.
Mhm.
Than I think Nina, you're from Georgia. I'm from Alabama. So, Gene, where did you grow up, and how did you find yourself working in forestry?
Okay. Well, thank you, Paul. Yeah, so I grew up in East Texas. I was actually born and raised in Bullard, kind of
Hmm.
ironically. Was able to come back here and manage the nursery, but grew up on a farm out in the country. We grew watermelons and cantaloupes, and that's what my dad and my granddad did for a living. So I love being outside. I love growing things. In high school, I was an FFA and did all the judging contests, and
Oh yeah,
never did the forestry, but plants and animals and all kinds of things like that. And so went to school at Stephen F. Austin University here in Nacogdoches, Texas, in East Texas. Majored in agronomy, so plant and soil science. That's my background. And once I finished with my bachelor's degree, I didn't really find anything in the job market that I was really excited about. So I decided to go back to school and got my master's, and then was able to, as you, Paul, was able to teach a couple of years in the ag department there at Stephen F. Austin University. Loved working with landowners. So a big part of my job was running the soil testing lab at the university. So we serviced, kind of a regional lab, farmers and ranchers in East Texas. And so I was able to write fertilizer recommendations and help those people, and there for a couple of years, and just really enjoyed that side of what I was doing at the university. But the opportunity came along to go to work for International Paper at the tree nursery where I'm at now. They were the owners back then, and so I applied for the job, and I've been here ever since. And so this is my 30th year.
mentioned a lot of things that we could dive down into, but one thing you just mentioned that is of ultra importance and interest to me. You talking about working at the soil testing laboratory. And, people, I think one of the big misses or something that people don't pay enough attention to is their soil chemistry. And I'm not going to
Right.
chase this rabbit down a rabbit hole. We're going to stick to seedlings and seedling quality. But you have a past experience then seeing the importance of getting that soil chemistry correct, doing that soil test, and making sure that all the nutrients that are needed there for proper growth are there. And then
That's
you
right.
also mentioned that you were a watermelon and cantaloupe grower, and you and I have frequent discussions about what is the best variety of watermelon and which
That's
one do
right.
you like the best and
Yeah.
which one has the best flavor and all of that kind of stuff. Nina, that's a whole new discussion that we could
Mhm.
all talk about
Yeah.
at another time. But with that being said, if I would like to jump into our main topic today, and we are talking about seedlings, and we are talking about how important the handling. Well, let's just start at the beginning and not go all the way back to the beginning to where we are planting the seeds in the nursery, but let's just say let's pick up in the seedling world. Let's say somewhere around October. And Nina, what begins in October, Gene, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's when a lot of what we call lifting starts taking place in the seedling world.
That's
Maybe
right.
not there at Bullard with bare root, but in other areas, October is usually usually the time when people start nurseries start coming alive in the fall and they start getting ready for that. So, Nina, you and I have talked, and I've heard your presentation a lot. It's a wonderful presentation. It's the 10 commandments of seedling handling. You know, can you just, as we go through this, talk about the lifting and how important it is, what it entails, how important it is that that is done properly. And I'm just going to let you talk about it, Nina, and then Gene, you can pick up and talk about how we do it here at ArborGen.
All right.
Sure.
So, we're talking about two different kinds of lifting, one in bare root nurseries and one in container nurseries. So they're very different. So in my presentation that I give, the 10 commandments for better seedling survival, I do talk about, I don't talk so much about lifting, but part of that presentation talks about why we don't do certain things at outplanting because they've already been done in the nursery. And it starts with lateral pruning of the roots and then undercutting of the roots in October, maybe earlier than that, I'm not sure, Gene. But that prepares the seedlings to be lifted out of the ground when they are starting in November or whenever each nursery starts for bare root nurseries.
And what does that actually do? I mean, when I hear you say, I've heard lateral cutting or lateral pruning and undercutting. What exactly does that do, Nina?
So the purpose of it is to create a more balanced seedling, and the lateral pruning is a blade that's put into the side on the sides of each seedling row and actually cuts those lateral roots. Okay, so it's
You
going
mean
to
you actually cut the root?
actually cut the roots, not cutting everything off. We're just cutting those roots, and then Gene, I'm not sure how deep your undercutter goes in your beds.
Target is 5 to 6 inches on the bare root pine
Okay, so it'll
Below
be
the
a
soil,
yes.
below the soil surface.
So that goes underneath, and so that will cut those roots. If we don't cut those roots, we're gonna have, tap roots that are, really, really long, and lots
Yeah.
of roots that would make it almost impossible to plant the tree, to lift it out of the ground and then plant it.
okay,
Yeah.
so it's planting is to help with the planting as well.
Right, and
Okay.
to balance out the root and the shoot of the seedling too. So when those seedlings are eventually lifted, actually physically lifted out of the ground, they're Gene, what do you call like a reciprocating lifter blade?
Reciprocating. Well, yeah. So like a different terminology, like a reaching blade or
Mhm,
a blade that vibrates and helps
mhm.
loosen the soil before you lift the seedlings. Yeah.
So that's going in the ground under the
Hmm.
seedlings, and it's shaking back and forth like this under the seedlings, and you can see them pop up out of the ground and lay over. And so every nursery's got a different operation as far as when that happens. A lot of them will be put onto a conveyor belt that will go into very large packing bins that are then taken to the packing shed to be put in box or bundles or bags, however that nursery does it. Some nurseries will actually box and pack in the field. Some people do
Okay.
That's
that.
right.
I don't know if y'all do that or not, but some nurseries do that.
We do. Yes.
Then I've got some nurseries that actually they call it hand lifting. So they also do the lateral pruning and the root pruning. But when it comes time to actually lift, they'll do a very gentle reciprocating blade underneath and then actually collect those seedlings by hand. They've got a lot of people out there, but they'll collect them by hand to put them in in the box or bag or whatever they're doing. So they don't go through the conveyor belt and then to another system and another system. So, and those are very small nurseries that can afford to do that basically because it's very labor intensive. So that's on the bare root side, Gene, if you want to add any to that sequence.
No, I mean, I think you covered it well. We've done it both ways at Bullard, where we currently field pack our bare root seedlings. So they come out of the ground, they get sprayed. The roots get sprayed with gel to keep them from drying out. Then they go straight into the box or bag. We've also packed in a packing shed, which is how most of our nurseries do it, where they're brought in the bulk boxes. They hold approximately 15,000 seedlings, and are brought into a packing shed. Then you take them out of the box and put them on the grading chain, and you can cull seedlings or damaged seedlings, and then spray them with gel before they go in the bags or the boxes that we
So
package them in.
before we get into the packing and before we leave lifting, I want to go back to the lifting and Nina,
Hmm.
you mentioned that you see, of course, obviously, that with the nursery co-op, but you see a lot of different techniques that people do, and you see it everything from I would say from the most extreme to everything's mechanized and automated and everything all the way down to the hand the enlisting. But you also talked about the lateral and undercutting. Why do they do that? Why do they do the lateral cutting of the roots and the undercutting of the roots before they lift? Why don't they do that after they lift?
We do it in October. I don't know if is it ever done in September, Gene? Ever that early?
It can be, but typically no. I mean, you depending on what part of the country you're in and when your planting window is. I think some nurseries may try to do it earlier, but
Mhm.
undercutting's typically done in October, and then you want to allow some time for those roots to heal because that's going to
Okay.
stress that seedling when you prune those tap roots. And then we typically come back about a month later and do the lateral pruning. And you want to do that a few weeks before lifting as well, so those roots can heal and they kind of settle back into the bed before you come and lift them. Well, Nina touched on this. I mean, the balanced seedling is certainly the main driver there, but getting them out of the ground, if we did not prune the roots, we would strip and tear a lot of roots,
Mhm.
and that would stress the seedling and it could lead to poor survival.
Okay.
That's actually part of the care for the seedling, to get the balanced seedling, but to not damage it when you're lifting. And if we didn't prune the roots, we'd be damaging all those roots as
So
they
that's
got
why
pulled out of
in
the ground.
our seedling care and planting guide brochure that we hand out to all of our clients and customers and partners, that's why it says in there, do not cut or tear the roots at the time of planting.
Exactly.
It's already been done.
It's already been done, so there's no
Mm.
need in doing that. But Gene, to what you were saying is when you cut that root or when you tear that root or rip that root, you're opening up a lesion in that seedling that
That's
just
right.
like a lesion, let's say we skin our elbow or we cut
Hmm.
our hand, and as people in wound care, we go and we put some antibiotic ointment on it and a Band-Aid, or as my dad used to say, rub some dirt in it. But,
Right.
we do that to make sure that it doesn't get infected. Are you telling me that that can also happen to a seedling?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Maybe not infections, but it actually, it takes energy for that seedling to heal itself. So whether
Okay.
it gets damaged in the nursery or it gets damaged in the field, it's going to take time for that seedling to recover. So I mean, that everything that we do is geared towards doing a minimal amount of damage to those seedlings, getting them from the ground in the nursery to ultimately to our customers in the field. Yeah,
That's interesting. Well,
Oh, can
to
I
you
add one thing real quick? Okay. So one thing you can do as a landowner or as a consultant, I've done but or managing timberland. So when you're checking on planting crews, a lot of times wherever the boxes are, if you ever see piles of roots sitting there, that's a bad sign because that means your tree planters have pulled them out and have whacked off roots and left them there. And it's usually those lateral fibrous roots. And I'm sure in their minds, it's like there's too many roots here to plant to get the tree in the ground. But those roots are what gonna keep that seedling alive. So
right.
if you're on a planting site and you see piles of roots, that's not a good sign.
So I'm, moderating here and everything and and doing the interview, but to bring it around, I've actually driven up on a planting site for a partner of ours, Gene. And actually, when we pulled up, I saw one of the tree planters behind a truck, and I could see his little head. Or I could see his head bobbing up and down. And I
Mm,
thought, what in the world is he doing? And I jumped out of the truck and ran around, and he had his hodad between his feet, and, we'll talk about a hodad and a dibble here and shortly, but he had his hodad between his feet, and he was
mhm.
taking handfuls of seedlings, and he was using the sharp edge of his hodad, and his bobbing head
Yeah.
was his arms going up and down, and he was sawing off the roots off of the seedlings.
Mm,
And he was doing that
not good.
basically to make the planting easier so they could
That's
get it
right.
down in the hole. And,
That's right.
once spring comes around and everybody's gone, everybody, planting is done, everything's quieted down, and people walk out and they see a bunch of brown trees. And it's
Mm,
because you basically just cut off their life source of what they had to wake up in the
right.
spring and come out of dormancy. So, with
Right.
that being said, and using the word dormancy, there's a term that is used in seedlings and in reforestation called chilling hours. When I started in with ArborGen now 11 years ago, I'm in my 11th year with the company. When I started, I'd never heard the term chilling out. How important is that? And Nina and Gene, both of y'all can talk about, how important are chilling hours? What do we know about chilling hours? Is there any basis behind the science of chilling hour? And, tell me a little bit about it and what the nurseries say about it.
Certainly, I mean, that's a term that I learned very early in my career when I got into the seedling business. Definitely um, use the term chilling hour. So, chilling hour is something that we track at the nursery. It's the number of hours between 45 and 32 degrees. So, and you normally start tracking those around October 1st. And the goal has always been to get to 400 chilling hours. And a lot of people will say that that gives you, multiple weeks of storage time. But I think, my interpretation that I really use chilling hours now is how hardened off that seedling is, its ability to withstand sudden drops in temperature, to withstand cold events after it's been outplanted. The more chilling hours that you have, the more hardened off the seedling's going to be. They do tend to store longer, but it's our recommendation to plant the freshest seedlings as possible anyway. So if you kind of take that out of the equation, it's more of the ability of that seedling to withstand freezing temperatures after it's been outplanted is kind of how my interpretation of chilling hours now.
So it's like leading the seedling into dormancy.
Mhm.
That's right. Correct. Yeah.
What have you heard working with a lot of seedlings and seeing them over your career? What have you found?
So what we found recently is that there really is no data to support a certain number of chilling hours that will say, the tree is can withstand certain temperatures or a certain amount of storage. There are no recent studies at all that would use our species, our type of storage we use now. Um, s- that's one aspect of it.
Right,
The second one is that with our roller coaster of temperatures that we have now, that it'll be really cold and then it'll be back to 70, 80 degrees, then really cold again. As soon as we reach those chilling hours, three or 400, whatever, as soon as it warms back up, you've lost them and
right.
you got to start over again.
Yeah.
So it's like it almost doesn't. If we keep this roller coaster of very cold and very warm temperatures, we're going to lose them every year. So
That's right.
we don't even recommend that you track chilling hours anymore. So
Really?
yeah, it's a individual company's decision to do that. And other ag industry, like the peach industry, uses chilling hours in their crops too. So it's not unique to pine seedlings, but
Yeah.
we really don't have a good number
Uh-huh.
for chilling hours. We know how to record them, but we don't know what our target is. We don't know what that buys you. So,
Sure.
and especially when you can lose them so quickly, like we have the past couple of years, you know, we just don't recommend for that purpose to track chilling hours.
Right.
That's
Well, I
right.
can tell you that yesterday here in Northwest Alabama, I woke up yesterday before I left to go to the field. It was 21 when I left my
Oof.
house, and when I got home, it was 60.
Mm.
So a big range there. But Gene is, talking about chilling hours, and
Mhm.
I guess it's safe to say that with bare root seedlings, now is chilling hours, whether you're using it, whether the nursery uses it or not, Nina, or what the literature says, is it as important with containerized seedlings as it is with bare root? In that some people say, if it is important, if it's not, what would you say there would be the recommendation?
So with Gene, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead, Nana.
You
Go
grow
ahead.
containers. You go ahead.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, let me say, I agree 100% with Nina. The old, kind of a wives' tale on the chilling hours is just really, it's not a good indicator of storage time and so one thing we do at the nurseries, a couple of things, we have weather stations at most of our nurseries, so we're actually tracking temperatures at the nursery. We're not depending on some other location or the climate center or somebody like that to track it, and so we watch those fluctuations, those up and down in the temperature. What we really don't want to see are warm nighttime temperatures. That really makes us nervous when we see that, followed by a sudden drop to very cold temperatures. I think the co-op sent out an alert today.
They did.
ArborGen followed up by sending that alert out to all of our customers to watch for the cold weather that's coming up. And so, as soon as that we see those events coming, there's certain practices that we put into play at the nursery level. We want to make sure we've got good soil moisture, and there's some other things that we do. And But it kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation, just the quality of the seedling that we grow now. We have seedling quality standards, and I think we may get into this in a little more detail further down the road. But when I started 30 years ago, we were not producing seedlings with the root systems that we see today, and that's part of the reason that we have changed a lot of our practices. Were 30 for sure 30 years, but even 15 years ago, I'd never even heard the term root weight ratio. That's something that's very important to us now. We actually, ArborGen collects samples every year and sends them to Nina at
Mhm.
Auburn. I know a lot of the other member nurseries probably do the same thing, but we have target root weight ratios. The whole reason behind that is meeting those seedling quality standards that we've set for ourselves. But those seedlings survive better. They survive the
Right.
cold events. As far as the chilling hours on containers, again, my opinion is that it kind of goes back to our root pruning scenario. Since you do not prune the roots on containerized seedlings, you don't tend to not see the storage issues that you can see with bare root early in the season.
Okay.
And so it's really not a concern. I know industry wide, some member nurseries in the nursery co-op start, I know, as early as September, like in Florida and South Georgia, South Alabama, planting containerized seedlings. ArborGen, most of our customers typically start sometime in October. We'll start lifting containerized seedlings. We really don't have a big concern with storage time. Now, you wouldn't want to lift something in October and not plant it till February. I wouldn't
Right.
recommend that. But I don't think that's a chilling hour impact. I think that's just more of a storage time impact.
So
You could see decreased survival.
So before we jump into storage, and we're about to make that transition, I'd just like to, so Gene, just and Nina, what you've seen and you're out in the other nurse, Gene, this is really where our nurseries shine, is just because, like with you, Gene, 30 years of lifting practices and everything that we have learned over this. You mentioned that the seedlings that you were growing back when it was international paper did not have the root systems that we
Right.
have today. They were smaller, I am assuming is what you're saying. You know,
Smaller and less fibrous.
Smaller and less fibrous. And those fibrous roots, like we mentioned earlier, talked about the fibrous roots, the first order lateral roots, those fibrous roots are the ones that begin growing the first, or the first roots to start growing in the springtime.
Hmm.
So
That's right.
those are could be seen as the most important roots that are the top ones there. And I've heard, I learned a term after I started here with ArborGen. You called it shoot root weight ratio. I learned a term, root shoot to root ratio,
Hmm.
which was
Right.
2 to 1. You wanted 2 times the amount of shoot that you had to root, but you needed that to really, because let's face it, that's where all the carbohydrates and the nutrients are stored
That's
in the
right.
off season in the wintertime when they quote unquote go dormant, and whether they go completely dormant or not. I've heard people say about southern yellow pine or loblolly pine that those seedlings never completely go dormant because it is an evergreen. Our
Hmm.
our climates here in the southeastern United States never get to that point like with a hardwood where you see all the leaves fall off of it.
Right.
But yes, I mean, talking about the quality of the seedling that is coming out of the nursery and the time that we have spent, perfecting these, learning these growing techniques and everything. Well, with that being said, I want to jump then
I'm gonna
from
interrupt you one more time, Paul,
okay, go
before you
ahead,
get
Miss
off of
Nina.
that. So, you don't recommend using the shoot to root length
Okay,
ratio as a good measurement anymore. So
okay,
we do use root weight ratio, and so that's
okay,
the dry weight of the roots divided by the total weight, dry weight of the seedling, the shoots and the roots. So that's how that's calculated. But in
okay,
order so that's the dry weight of the roots divided by the dry weight of the shoot plus the root. That's how we
okay,
calculate that. In order to get that, though, you've got to have drying ovens that are set up, to get, biomass dry weights. So we have those here, and I would say ArborGen's one of our best members as far as sending in samples, mini samples every year to get root weight ratio of their seedlings. And the target for that is 30, and you reach that, anything lower than that, the tree is more spindly,
okay.
so we've hard to come up with any that are higher than that, but the target is about 30, and, ArborGen does a really good job as far as that root weight ratio that you're targeting.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because I'm not on that side, and that's
Mhm,
interesting. I'm glad you pointed that out. That's the more used
mhm.
number now for quality checks. That's very interesting. Thank you for pointing that out. I wanted to jump in now into the importance of shipping and talk about protecting the freshness and the viability of the seedling. We've gotten past the lifting. We've got them through the nursery, whether they were packed in the field or packed in the packing shed, whether they were bare root or containerized, and any of those would be a hour-long podcast. But now let's jump into shipping and how important is, fast shipping and how important is the whole shipping from because look, when it leaves the nursery until it gets to its what I call its final resting place where it's gonna be planted, Gene, we're kinda our hands are off of them because we're at the mercy of whoever is driving that truck and whoever picked them up at the nursery. So, Miss Nina, how important is it to protect those seedlings during shipping?
It's probably the most important step and that you can really mess it up
Okay.
and really damage the seedlings.
How can it get messed up?
So if you pick up your seedlings, your boxes of seedlings at the nursery, if you're a tree planter, landowner, whatever, and you don't transport them correctly, that's in a covered, hopefully in a covered trailer, at least with
Mhm.
a tarp over the trailer,
Okay.
not in an open trailer, especially if it gets warm. You don't want the seedlings to get warm and the wind blow it on them too. It's just a lot of different factors. So if you can keep it covered with a tarp, and then when you get to the site, it's best to store those in a refrigerated van. That's the best way to store them
Okay.
if you're not gonna be planting all of them that day. If you don't have any place to store them, like in a barn or shed or something like that where they're protected somehow from sunlight and cold, you don't need to pick up that many. You
Okay.
need to just pick up what you can plant that day.
So you're saying that we need that they need to be you don't need to just take every tree you have out to the planting site, and then that afternoon, if you don't get around to finishing that all of those, you carry them back and put them back in storage, and then take them out the next morning and bring them back to the planting site, and then back and forth like that. That can be detrimental to the
Right, just take out what you can plant that day, what you're planning on getting done that day.
okay. Alright. And what temperatures do you usually wanna store these at if you're a lot of times people don't have temperature controlled. We see everything from, reefer vans, refrigerated vans, to people carrying them out in little covered trailers to people carrying them out in the back of a pickup truck. So let's face it, what temperatures are we saying they need to be held at?
So you don't want them to get below freezing, right? If
Okay.
they're stored, let's say if they're stored on site, you don't have a reefer van, and it's
Okay.
stored even in a shed or a barn, you don't want them to get below freezing. You don't want those seedlings to
Yeah, that
freeze,
makes a lot of
okay?
sense.
You don't want them to get too hot either. And with the temperatures fluctuating like they are, we'd love to see them at 35, somewhere around there, but we know that's
Mhm.
impossible
Okay.
because of the way
All
the
right.
temperatures are, and there's wind and there's sun. So, between, well, 35 to us is ideal to store seedlings, but in the grand scheme of things, we're not ever gonna get that on every site. So, the key is not to let them freeze, don't let them get too hot.
Just right.
Okay, just right,
Yeah,
like
and I
Goldilocks.
would add yeah, I would just add, and don't let them dry out. That's another,
Mhm,
Right.
that would be the one combination of the sun and the wind, that
mhm,
exposure, you could see seedlings dry out,
mhm.
and
Well, I was gonna
that's not
ask you,
good.
Gene, what are your thoughts as long as you've done this, what are your thoughts on proper seedling, and what do we do at ArborGen? What do we do to make sure that our shipping is, top notch, that it is actually, that it is looking when we ship seedlings, we are looking out for the quality, for the health of that seedling.
Oh, sure. So, it's about quality packaging. We want to do a good job packing the seedlings, make sure we put plenty of gel on the roots if they don't dry out. We try to get them from the ground to that refrigerated storage that Nina was talking about as quickly as we can. We do keep it around that 34, 35 degrees is the temperature that we recommend. I think, if you anything between 35 and 40, you're probably okay, but that, mid 30s is the best. And anytime, we have a lot of customers that pick up at the nursery, just the way Nina was describing, with covered trailers, and some have their own refrigerated trailers, but there's also a lot of throw them in the back of the pickup and take off, and we don't know how far they're going or how many they're going to get planted today. And we try to encourage them to protect them, just like we've been saying here. But we deliver so many of our seedlings to our customers, our partners. We set refrigerated vans on site that, we provide the van, and they, set the temperature, and we recommend that they monitor the fuel and monitor the temperature and so forth. We have a large network of satellite coolers that we ship into, that we staff, or we contract with others to staff for us, that we're maintaining that refrigerated storage. So they can do like Nina was describing, they can show up and just pick up what they need for that day, and then go plant those and come back tomorrow and pick up some more. So again, like she was saying, protect those seedlings
Right.
as best you can. We try to provide fresh seedlings, much of, especially our early lifting with whether it's containers or bare root, after Thanksgiving and before Christmas, we're pretty much just lifting based on orders. Meaning our customers call and say, I need to pick up X number of seedlings next week or tomorrow or whenever it is, and so we will go lift those seedlings, and that way they've got fresh seedlings. As we get later in the season, that has to change. We start dealing with the springtime, and seedlings want to break bud. And so we're trying to get them out of the ground and get them in the cooler so they're better protected before they start growing again, in, the late February, early March. But we're keeping those in refrigerated storage the whole time. They're protected through the whole process.
Well, let me ask you this. You talked about having fresh seedlings and people showing up at the nursery and everything. Is it safe to assume that someone could just show up one day or call that day and say, "Hey, I'm ready for my seedlings. I'm coming to get them." Or what do they need? Is there a certain amount of time that you need to be given a heads up so that we can have fresh seedlings for you available that have been lifted? Because if you just show up that day and without giving us any warning or without giving the nursery any warning, the seedlings, may still be in the nursery bed, and because we don't
That's
lift them
right.
all at once, do we, Gene?
No, no, we don't.
Okay.
No, and most of our nurseries, ArborGen is, not every nursery is a one-stop shop, meaning we don't necessarily grow everything at every nursery that every one of our customers would want.
Right.
So, and it
It's
many
just not
times,
possible.
Right, whether it's containerized or bare root or even hardwood seedlings, we may have to bring those in from another nursery. But you're right. So to answer your question, we recommend at least 3 to 5 days notice. So if you already have an order with us and we know we're going to lift seedlings for you, still give us 3 to 5 days notice. We've got many other clients that they're also planting at the same time. So we're trying to manage for a lot of different orders at any one time. Yeah.
I would say sometimes 3 to 5 days, if you get into the thick of things and things are running like, when everybody's running, it could be, if you could give longer than that, it would be optimal.
Yes,
I remember I've heard people say it sometimes that if you could give a 2 weeks notice,
that's right.
even better. That way that you make sure that everything is nobody's in a rush doing anything, and you're getting fresh seedlings. You're getting seedlings that have been properly handled, and then they've been packaged and everything properly. Nothing's been done in a rush.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, the more notice, the better. Of course, something we're dealing with this year. I think a lot of the southeast was dry early,
Mhm.
and so people delayed planting, and so now many of those people that delayed are wanting to get started. They either got some rain or and they realize we're running out of planting season. That it's going to be, the end's going to be here before we know it, and so a lot of people are ordering trees right now at all of our nurseries. So we're all very very busy.
Well, that leads us in. Thank you, Gene, for setting up
Yeah.
that segue. I don't know if you did that
Yeah.
on purpose or not, but thank you very much.
No.
We're gonna dive now, we're gonna
Yeah.
segue into the planting. Now we've lifted them, we've packaged them, we've got them loaded in the cooler, we've got them loaded on the truck, and we've sent them out to what I call their final resting place, where they're going to be planted to spend the rest of their lives growing and producing the saw logs and poles that we know they will produce. So let's talk about planting and how important proper planting is, Nina, and I know you see a lot of this every year, but, planting depth and spacing, how important is it? How important is planting depth? Let's say, okay, you've done everything perfect. Everything in the nursery was perfect. Everything was lifted perfectly. Everything was packaged perfectly. Everything was shipped perfectly. Everything was delivered perfectly. What if you get it to the site and the last thing that you're going to do is plant this tree? And how important is that?
So planting depth will contribute, make or break the survival of the seedling if you plant it too shallow. So most pine species except longleaf need to be planted at least 8 inches deep. At
8
least,
inches
at least
at
that.
least. See, I've always been told, some people have said, "Oh, you gotta plant it to the ground line diameter where it was growing in the nursery, or you gotta plant it just above that." You're saying at least 8
At
inches.
least 8 inches. You can go way above the ground line diameter. I mean, you plant that into the ground as long as
Okay.
the grain is showing, you still need some of that top growing, but you've got to plant it deep. You've got to mainly get all those roots in the ground so that when you pack it in, those roots are touching dirt, right? They're
Why
coming
is
in
depth important? Why is it important to get it that deep?
so that the roots have plenty of space to grow. If you plant it shallow, you're probably going to have some of those lateral roots on top of the ground, and they will
Right.
dry out, and that will kill the seedling pretty fast. But you'll
Yeah.
also, if it's too shallow, when you plant that taproot straight down and you hit the bottom of the hole, it will curve up. We call that
Mhm.
J rooting or L rooting. It
Uh-huh.
may not kill the tree, but it's not gonna be a pretty tree when it's growing. So,
Okay.
that's why you want that depth, to give that
Okay.
seedling plenty of room with the roots. There's more water down there. That's really important with everything but longleaf. So, longleaf needs to be planted shallow because with it, you don't want to cover up the bud. So, what we recommend with longleaf is to leave maybe not quite an inch, but leave some of that plug still showing at the top of the ground.
Then and thank you for bringing that up to the listeners out there. We are when we're talking about planting 8 inches deep, we are strictly talking about slash and loblolly.
Right, mhm.
And longleaf is a whole different beast. So, it's a whole different animal. It has different planting techniques, different planting guidelines. So, this is strictly for loblolly and slash. So, when we talk about planting depth, and Dinah, you touched on something there. that I was hoping you would, talking about soil moisture. So I have told, and I stand by, and I've seen it with my own eyes. To me, and on my own private, planting project, I wanted those seedlings as deep as they could get them. And I told them, instructed the planter and the consulting forester. And yes, I did hire a consulting forester to oversee my planting job because it was that important, because I was not able to be there that day. I wanted 3 inches sticking out of the ground and everything else below it. And I will tell you why. The last 2 to 3 years, we have had severe droughts in the southeastern United States. And if you can get that tap root that deep, it is going to be in contact with moisture, even if we have a severe drought. Because I've always said, if it gets dry that deep, we've got a lot more to worry about than just seedling survival.
Seedling survival, that's right.
There's a lot more problems we're going to be worried about, like eating. So my theory is, I've always told them, plant them as deep as you can. That bud, as long as you don't bury that bud, I feel like you're just increasing that chance of that seedling survival and it not succumbing to a drought in the dry part of the year. Gene, I'm sure you've seen a lot of seedling planting depth issues in your experience.
Oh, absolutely. Just like, both of you have described, where they, what when clients have called me and I've gone out to look at, survival issues. That's the first thing I look at is planting depth, and because saying sometimes they look like maybe they were planted deep enough, but to Nina's point, you find out it's been J rooted or L rooted or even some of them shoved in the ground so hard that the tap roots will be broken. And I know that's not good on the
Right,
seedling,
right.
where they actually fold it up. So, very important to get it planted deeply and certainly, would recommend just like you're saying, Paul. I mean, 8 inches, 8 to 9 inches deep, is probably only going to leave like 3 to 4 inches of top sticking out of the ground in most cases or on average. And so that's definitely would be my recommendation. Plant as deep
That's
as possible.
easier said than done in some soil
Yeah.
types.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like in South Georgia clay, when it gets really
yes.
hard, you can't
Hmm.
get a dibble in the ground.
Right.
So,
Right.
Thanks,
that's a
Nina.
challenge for tree planters to get them in deep, and if nobody's out there watching them,
Hmm.
coming behind them, and one way you can check to make sure your seedling's packed in good is just pull 2 or 3 of the top needles when it's in the ground, pull 2 or 3 of the top needles. If it doesn't pull up, then it's packed in real good. If it starts moving, you gotta replant it or get
Well,
another
you just
separate
brought up
one.
something different now. We were talking about depth, and you just jumped to compaction and talking about packing the seedling. Why is it important to have the seedling packed tight?
So that the roots are touching soil, okay? And also it's getting rid of air pockets,
Okay,
so
air is bad.
you don't want anything drying out that you can help. So if that you put the seedling in the ground and then you come back and pack it in, then
Mhm.
that all around those roots are touching soil and
Okay.
and therefore water and nutrients and everything else that it needs.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for bringing that up. Well, I can tell you, talking about planting quality and everything, as an RA for ArborGen reforestation advisor. Yesterday, I was spent the whole day with a partner of ours out looking at planting and freshly planted trees that had been planted within the last 2 weeks, and we saw both extremes. We saw seedlings that had been planted and were very deep and very tight, but at the same time, we found some that were so shallow that those first order lateral roots were on top of the ground. And it all came back to, Miss Nina, what you were just talking about, the type of soil that it was in. Took a shovel on those tracks that were shallow planted, and I took a shovel, and you could not press it down into the ground more than 2 inches. It was a
Mhm.
very clay type soil. It was in a bottomland. It was very clay. You could tell that there was what we call modeling close to the top of the surface, which showed a lot of moisture in the soil. That's a whole different discussion. We're not going down that rabbit hole. But, for those people out there, as far as for ArborGen, as a reforestation for ArborGen, I know if you are curious or you are concerned about planting quality or would like for somebody to come out and look at the planting. I know as a reforestation advisor, me and my colleagues, we go out all the time. I spent the whole day yesterday. I've got colleagues that were in the field yesterday. that is what we do is during planting season is most days we're not sitting behind a computer. We're actually out there watching planters, grabbing those top 3 needles and pulling up on them to see if we see any movement or anything, and trying to help troubleshoot some of these issues, if they are in fact taking place.
That's why it's also important to either hire a consultant that or someone that can be there on the site when it's planted. If nobody's checking those tree planting crews, they're
Right,
like the teenagers, they're gonna
right,
try to get by with something.
right.
So, you've got to have someone watching the farthest I always say go to the farthest point away from the road where they're getting the seedlings that they've had to walk the furthest to
Yep.
get to or take the tractors. You go put some plots out there to make sure that your seedlings are planted deep enough and at the right spacing. So you've got but you need someone checking it as it's being done. After it's done, just like you saw yesterday, within 2 weeks, and a
It's
lot of
done.
times you can't get those planting crews back,
No,
right?
no,
So
it's
it's
done.
Mhm.
like you're gonna waste a year of growth.
Well, just like I mentioned earlier, and we've talked about at the beginning, I'm a registered forester. I'm a reforestation advisor. I do this on a day-to-day basis, and I had a reforestation project on family land. I could not be there that day. I've hired a consulting forester to be there with the planters and to stand there and watch them to make sure because some of us, we only get one chance to do this. You only get one shot at this, and when it's done, it's done. And that's how important every step that we've just talked about on this call, on this podcast, is that you get it right the first time because it can cause you. And I understand now why planting season is so stressful for a lot of people because a lot of things have to line up in order for things, and you mess one thing up and you may not get the outcome that you thought you were gonna get, and as a reforestation advisor, I'll be glad, my colleagues and we would love to come out and talk to people and work with people at doing this, maybe troubleshooting some issues and everything. Well, with that being said, Miss Nina and Gene, is there anything y'all would like to close out with or would like to say before we call this one to an end?
ArborGen's got your own tree planting guidelines, a
Yes,
booklet
ma'am.
of those, and so even if you're not an ArborGen customer, you can still get that book, right?
We put this out, we'd be glad to give this to you. It has the do's and the don'ts in
Mhm,
it. It also has a lot of good information about how to plant a pine tree the
mhm.
proper way, and it is something that if you would like one of these, they're readily available.
You can also go online. For instance, the Alabama Extension, Cooperative Extension Service has got a really good 2-page little booklet about planting trees. The Georgia Forestry Commission's got something similar that's very easy to read. So, if I was a landowner, didn't know anything about it, I'd hire a consultant. But if I was gonna do it myself, you've got to be taught by the experts. You've got to get your information before you plant your trees.
Okay. Gene, any closing thoughts?
Oh, I would just add, we try to work with our customers to help them select the best genetics and provide the highest quality seedlings and set them up for to be successful. If they don't plant them, if they're not planted properly, then all that's for nothing, just like we've been talking about. So,
I can't thank both of you enough for taking the time to just help people understand how important these steps are when it comes to reforestation. And we live it every day. All three of us do. It is so important that you get this right and you get one shot at it. And it is very, I mean, to the success of your project. And let's face it, it's an investment. It's a lot of money that goes in reforesting well before you get to the point of lifting and packing and planting the seedlings. So it is an investment that
And don't
all landowners go through if they are a timber landowner and invest in timber. And with that being said, I would like to again thank both of you for coming on. It has been a
thank you.
joy and a pleasure.
It
And
has
with that, and the ArborGen Tree Lines podcast, we would like to bid you all a very, very fond farewell. And we will see you next time on the Tree Lines podcast.
right. Goodbye.